SDPB celebrates South Dakota's student athletes with live coverage of SDHSAA state championships, sharing the excitement of hometown heroes. SDPB, good, useful, and full of wonder.
You are live.
The meeting of House Commerce and Energy is called to order. Welcome to everyone joining us in the room and those of you on the internet. If you're in the room, please turn your cell phones to silent. Lobbyists must be wearing their badges for their respective organizations. Testifiers must sign in the guest register with the page. Pages will distribute any handouts you may have. All testimony and questions will be directed through the chair. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward,
Here.
Duffy,
Here.
Greenfield,
Here.
Kaiser,
Here.
Mullally,
Present.
Knowles,
Here.
Peterson excused, Schwanz,
Here.
Shurma, Yuri Bulk excused, Weisgram excused. Representative Lems
Here.
and Baummuller.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? Second. We have a motion by Representative Knowles, second by Representative Kaiser. This is a voice vote. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Interns and pages, at this time, we would like to welcome you to the microphone to introduce yourself, where you are from, your year in school, and your favorite meal.
Hi, I'm Taryn Torsney. I'm from Tyndall, South Dakota. My future plans are to go into the Army National Guard, and my favorite meal is supper.
A little more definition. It's like,
Did you? Oh, we meant the food. Way over my head.
Hi, my name is Rania DeCam. I go to Chamberlain High School. Did you want me to say my future plans? Is that what? Okay, sorry. So after I graduate high school, I will be getting my undergrad in business and technology, and then continuing to law school to become an attorney. And my favorite meal has to be lasagna.
Oh, yeah. Hi, my name is Kaya Williamson. I'm a sophomore at South Dakota State University studying history education in hopes of teaching middle school to high school. For whatever reason, I like the chaos of junior high. So middle school history or government, civics, social studies topics. And I'd say my favorite food is any variation of pasta.
Hi, my name is Bailey Feisner. I'm from Woonsocket, South Dakota, and I'm a senior at the University of South Dakota, where I'm studying legal studies and political science. I'll be going to law school in the fall, and my favorite food, I have to agree with the pasta statement, but probably chicken Alfredo tops it. I love the sauce, so.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your service to South Dakota. Today, we will be having 3 bills. We will be taking testimony from those in the room first and then those online. If someone has testified prior to you and has the same thing, please do not repeat them. A simple me too. We are going to be, I believe, tabling 2 of the bills. So the chair is going to be changing the agenda. We're going to take 1224 last. So up first, we have House Bill 1284. Provide, and he's not here. He is actually not here, so we are going to move on to House Bill 1309, restrict the processing of online personal data of individuals 16 years of age or younger. Do we have any proponent testimony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Schubeck. We're going to table this. It's something I'm passionate about, but I think the bill needs some more work before it's ready for showtime. So,
thank you, Representative Schubeck. Mr. Schubeck has asked us to table that. Do I have a
Madam
motion?
Chair, I make a motion to table the bill.
Thank you. We have a motion by Representative Greenfield and a second by Representative Schwantz to table. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Representatives Elward.
Aye.
Duffy.
Aye.
Greenfield.
Aye.
Kaiser.
Aye.
Mullally.
Aye.
Knowles.
Aye.
Peterson excused. Schwantz.
Aye.
Shorma. Yuri Balk excused. Weisgram.
Aye.
Lems.
Aye.
Baumüller.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 11 yea, 2 excused.
Thank you. House Bill 1309 is tabled. Okay, moving on. Representative Weisgram, we are going to take your bill right now if you're ready. Oh. So House Bill 1384, provide an alcohol beverage may be carried and consumed in enterprises connected to and in the same building as a bar or lounge. Any proponent testimony?
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee. Representative Mike Weisgram, District 24. Well, this bill has gone several circles, and I would report that the interested stakeholders are going to continue to work on this after session. So I see some good things in the future, but at this point, I would go ahead and move to table HB 1284.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair.
Representative Knowles.
I move to table 1284.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to table House Bill 1284. Motion made by Knowles, seconded by Kaiser. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
Aye.
Duffy.
Aye.
Greenfield.
Aye.
Kaiser.
Aye.
Mullally.
Aye.
Knowles.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Schwantz.
Aye.
Shorma. Yuri Balk excused. Weisgram.
Aye.
Lems.
Aye.
Baumüller.
Aye.
Madam Chair, 12 yea, 1 excused.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. After receiving the affirmative number of those present, House Bill 1284 is tabled. All right, we're just moving on. This one might take a little bit longer. So the chair is going to limit the proponent and opponent testimony to 15 minutes. I guess if we have to go on, we can, since we do have time. Do I have any proponent testimony on House Bill 1224, an act to protect persons from discriminating by financial institutions? Representative Lems.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Representative Carla Lems from District 16, bringing you today House Bill 1224. So, House Bill 1224 is a necessary step in ensuring that the fundamental rights of South Dakotans are not locked out of their accounts and trampled upon by the big banks. I want to note that this is not targeted at our local banks. I so appreciate their work. They're just a great asset to our local communities and help so much with our economic growth throughout the state. This is specific to banks that have transactions of over $100 billion per year. So this bill is about one thing. It's about transparency and freedom. In recent years, we have seen a growing and concerning trend of debanking, where individuals and small business owners find their accounts closed or services denied without a clear explanation. And too often, these adverse actions are tied not to financial risk, but to a person's religious exercise, their speech, or their participation in perfectly lawful economic activities. Think Canadian truckers, attenders of January 6th. Even our own family voice has been affected by this. And I would just mention President Trump has also had his share of this as well. And you will note the handout from the Office of the White House on this issue. So, we're talking about discrimination. Financial institutions will be prohibited from denying services based on protected expressions of faith or speech. So if a bank closes your account, you would have the right to request a written statement within 90 days, and the bank must respond within 30 days with a specific reason. So it ends the black box policy. No longer can a bank hide behind vague internal policies or proprietary standards to justify targeting a customer for their beliefs. Now, let me be clear about what the bill doesn't do. It does not force a bank to take on legitimate financial risks. We have built in clear good faith protections for institutions making decisions based on profitability, safety, and legal compliance. If a customer is a credit risk or if a transaction violates federal law, the bank is absolutely protected. But if a South Dakotan is being punished for what they say in the public square, or how they worship on Sunday, that is a deceptive trade practice. And this bill gives teeth to our laws and gives affected citizens the tools to hold the institution accountable. We must ensure that the economic engine of our society remains neutral. Access to a bank account is essential for modern life, and it should not be used as a political or social weapon. So I would urge a do-pass recommendation on House Bill 1224, and with that, I will let the other proponents testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lems. Do I have any further proponent testimony?
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Members of the committee. Don Hager. I'm a registered lobbyist on behalf of Americans for Prosperity, South Dakota. I want to talk about this bill. I think the way folks talk at the cafe or the co-op, just plain practical and to the point. And I'm going to hit 4 ideas for you because that's really what this bill's about. First, banking ought to be about money, not beliefs. Most South Dakotans believe, rightly I think, that when you walk into a bank, the questions should be simple ones. Can you repay the loan? Is the account in good standing? Does this make good business sense? And what House Bill 1224 does or says is that banks really shouldn't be making decisions based on your church or your speech or your opinions, or whether you're involved in a perfectly lawful line of work, whether you're running a farm or a small nonprofit or a gun shop or a political group or a business. If what you're doing is legal, you deserve a fair shake. And this bill really doesn't give anyone special treatment. It just keeps ideology out of banking. And then secondly, Sunlight really fixes a lot of problems. One of the strongest parts of this bill is the transparency piece. So if a bill takes an adverse action, closes an account, denies a loan, or restricts services, you can ask why, and they have to give you an answer. Not corporate word salad, not internal policy, a reason. And that's just basic fairness. And in rural South Dakota, a neighbor won't do business with you. If they won't, they'll usually have the decency to tell you why. And House Bill 1224 really asks large financial institutions to live by the same standard. And if the decision was made for legitimate reasons, like credit risk or default or regulatory compliance, well, guess what? This bill fully allows that. Number 3, this bill protects free markets, not politics. So some folks worry, oh, this is a heavy-handed piece of regulation, and I'll actually argue the opposite. This bill prevents coordinated blacklisting and market manipulation by some of the very large financial players. South Dakota believes in competition and free enterprise, and we believe businesses should win or lose based on service and price and trust, not because someone flipped a switch in a boardroom 1,000 miles away. House Bill 1224 says banks can still manage risk, protect safety and soundness, and follow the law. But they can't gang up or quietly punish people for some sort of lawful activity. And finally, there's accountability, but it's balanced. If a bank violates this law, there are consequences, and just like any other deceptive trade practice. But the bill is careful. Good faith business decisions are protected. Banks can still deny services they don't offer, comply with the federal law, and act when accounts are delinquent. And if someone brings a bad faith lawsuit, the court can make that right too. That's not a weapon, it's a guardrail. So at the end of the day, I think the bill does reflect South Dakota values. Mind your own business, play it straight, don't discriminate, and don't hide the ball. So I'll ask you, good committee, to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. Do we have any further proponent testimony? Or has he signed in?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Sharp. I'm senior counsel with ADF Action. Our organization advocates for free speech, religious liberty, life, and family. We analyze proposed laws and their effect on constitutional freedoms. In the 1930s, in a despicable practice known as redlining, financial institutions created maps with certain neighborhoods marked in red. Banks and lenders viewed residents of those neighborhoods as hazardous or too risky and would not issue them home loans. But as we know, such redlining was not based on financial risk. It was based on racial discrimination against predominantly black neighborhoods. Today, we are witnessing a modern-day version of redlining under the guise of so-called reputational risk. Large banks and payment processors are discriminating against businesses and consumers because of their religious beliefs, their political views, or because they're involved in the firearm or energy industries. For example, Bank of America closed the long-standing account of ADF's client Indigenous Advance Ministries, a Christian nonprofit that helps impoverished widows and children in Uganda. Bank of America claimed it no longer wanted to serve their business type and that Indigenous Advance exceeded the bank's risk tolerance. But this cancellation happened right before a mission trip to Africa, causing irreparable damage to the ministry's work. It couldn't pay its poverty-stricken Ugandan workers for several weeks. Recently, we learned that several Indiana-based firearm companies were debanked by major banks and credit processors with no notice and no explanation. And here in South Dakota, Sioux Falls-based Silencer Central had its account shut down by Capital One after the CEO of the company testified about bias against firearm manufacturers before this body. South Dakota business and consumers need protection against the growing risk of debanking. Hardworking individuals should never worry that one day they will wake up to find that their card is declined because a large bank disagrees with their opinions or their views. HB 1224 signals to local businesses and consumers that the legislature is standing with them, who built South Dakota into the thriving state it is today, rather than with massive financial institutions that often push a woke agenda. 1224 simply says that banks with $100 billion in transactions should not discriminate against South Dakota businesses and consumers because of their speech, their religious beliefs, and their involvement in any lawful business like the firearm industry or oil and gas industry. A bank can't shut down a pregnancy center's bank account because of their pro-life speech. A credit card company can't cancel the accounts of a religious ministry because of its beliefs about what it means to be male and female. This builds upon SB 81, which South Dakota recently passed to protect firearm sellers, but it expands those protections to First Amendment activities as well. And to help ensure transparency and accountability of big banks, the bill requires that written explanation of why it closed the account. Otherwise, banks can hide discriminatory actions through silence by refusing to respond when a consumer harmed by their actions reaches out to understand why their accounts were inexplicably shut down. Both Tennessee and Idaho have recently passed legislation exactly like HB 1224 to protect their businesses and consumers. The legislation has proved hugely successful with no further instances of debanking in those states and no unintended consequences to the banks and financial institutions subject to the law. In 2024, Attorney General Jackley joined with 14 other attorneys general in a letter to Bank of America calling out for it to stop discriminating based upon a consumer's religious or political views. And in August of last year, President Trump issued his Guaranteeing Fair Banking for All Americans executive order. In it, the president described how, quote, individuals, their businesses, and their families have been subjected to debanking on the basis of their political affiliations, religious beliefs, and lawful business activities. While this executive order is a great move to ensure that federal banking regulators are taking steps to address debanking, executive orders can easily be undone by the next occupant of the White House. HB 1224 would put lasting, strong protections against debanking into state law, protecting businesses and citizens from debanking for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Any other further proponent testimony? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to opponent testimony. Do we have any?
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brett Afdahl with the Department of Labor and Regulation with the Division of Banking. Here to urge you to vote no on House Bill 1224. South Dakota has a great ecosystem of banks, credit unions, trust companies, money lenders, mortgage lenders, credit card offerers, payment systems of all types and sizes. These entities do a great job of serving their customers, their communities, and our state as a whole. They understand what they are good at and also areas beyond their scale, size, expertise, and specialty. We expect a lot out of those institutions we regulate. If a bank we regulate makes loans or offers payment services to customers they don't understand, they take on risk that's beyond their capacity. One loan that goes south takes multiple good loans to earn back to even. We do have entities in the state that specialize in different areas: residential mortgages, trucking receivables, credit cards, student loans, dealer floor plan financing, ACH, and payroll processing. Not all of these institutions are experts in all of these areas, and it should be up to them to decide what areas they operate in. Again, we expect them to understand these different areas before they engage with customers. At the end of the day, these entities are regulated, but they are privately owned and operated businesses. The liability for any loan that goes south is on the board and ultimately on their ownership. Management answers to their shareholders. Loans and other services can be provided safely to consumers and profitably to institutions with smart regulation in place, but not the kind of government overreach that's included in this bill. I've been with the division for a long time. This September will be 20 years, and we've just not received complaints like this against any of the institution we regulate. So why would we create new criminal penalties and civil causes of action for a new and expansive definition of discrimination which places the burden of proof on the financial institution in every instance. If a person in South Dakota has a good idea and a good business plan, there are almost unlimited options for financial services in our state. We have 39 state chartered banks that we regulate. There's an additional 30 banks of different charter types and sizes that operate in South Dakota. There's over 30 credit unions, over 100 trust companies, 200 money transmitters, 400 non-bank mortgage lenders, and almost 600 non-bank money lenders. One thing that's clear in this bill who the real winners will be, and it's the lawyers. It's always the lawyers. And I heard at least a couple people here looking to go to law school, so this will be great for them. And I'm not opposed to that as a member of the South Dakota Bar. But there will be lawyers to fight over who is covered by this bill. Is it any state chartered bank like I believe it is, or is it only large banks as the proponents indicate? Does it cover national banks? Does it cover those money transmitters we regulate? What about the trust companies? What data set will be used to determine the transaction levels of these different types of entities? And what the heck is a payment gateway? It's in the bill, but it's not defined. There will be lawyers to review and update internal policies and procedures, lawyers to review decisions on every account, loan, and payment program, lawyers to review and document each decision to discontinue services to individuals and businesses, lawyers to prosecute and defend the new criminal provisions in Section 5 of the bill, lawyers in the public and private sector on both sides of the civil causes of action created in Section 6. And heck, we might even invite some lawyers from outside of South Dakota to come and pursue the broad causes of action and generous recovery provisions in this bill, also in Section 6. So in short, House Bill 1224 is a complicated and expansive burden on private industry in South Dakota. And instead of solving an existing problem, this bill creates new problems. Some we can envision and some we cannot. At the end of the day, some institutions that currently offer services in South Dakota might decide that it's not worth the burden and expense to continue to do that. So I would urge you to vote no on House Bill 1224. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Afdahl. Further opponent testimony.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition of House Bill 1224 today. My name is Dave Rosenboom. I'm president of First Premier Bank. First Premier Bank is a state chartered bank in South Dakota. All 13 of our branches are operations center, and our nearly 400 employees are located right here in South Dakota. We're a full-service community bank with over $3.6 billion in total assets. We provide a full range of financial services to consumers, businesses, organizations, and ag producers all across the state of South Dakota. We're also proud to serve as the primary bank for the state of South Dakota for the past 30 years and for the city of Sioux Falls for the past 21 years. We're opposed to House Bill 1224 for many reasons. As a state-chartered, Fed member bank, our primary regulators are the South Dakota Division of Banking, as well as the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. We are subject to regular and rigorous examinations for safety and soundness and consumer affairs to ensure that we are in compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This certainly includes anti-discrimination legislation, such as Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the Civil Rights Act. However, we believe that House Bill 1224 will create overlapping and conflicting standards with existing law. It's certainly going to expand protected categories well beyond their traditional frameworks. It's going to increase regulatory ambiguity, and it will undoubtedly increase our compliance and legal expenses, taking resources away from lending and other services that we provide. While proponents of House Bill 1224 even today may argue that this bill isn't really targeting community banks like First Premier Bank, it absolutely does. One of our business lines is our Treasury Services team that provides ACH services for clients all over the United States, primarily direct deposit of payroll services for for payroll processing companies. A frame of reference, in 1995, we started this business line. We did 2,000 electronic payment transactions. Last year, in 2025, we processed over 269 million electronic payments, totaling over $470 billion, making us the 13th largest originator of ACH transactions of the 4,400 banks in the United States. This business line alone puts us squarely in the crosshairs of House Bill 1224. And I'd like to share a relevant story. Back in 2013, one of our ACH customers was unfairly targeted by Operation Choke Point. That was a highly controversial initiative of the Department of Justice politically targeting disfavored industries by coercing banks to cut ties with perfectly lawful business customers without due process. We experienced firsthand the adverse effect of this form of government overreach, which essentially forced us to choose between the Department of Justice and our lawful customer. In much the same way, House Bill 1224 is its own form of government overreach, again putting banks squarely in the middle of what can be a political football game. Instead of saying you can't do business with companies in a given industry, like Operation Choke Point clearly aimed to do, House Bill 1224 in essence says you must do business with any and all lawful economic activity, or at very least be able to legally defend why you may choose not to. As I shared before, there are nearly 4,400 banks in the United States. Deciding what services to provide and which customers to serve is a core business judgment of community bankers like me. House Bill 1224 substitutes government mandates for local business discretion, and it further politicizes banking decisions, and it will very much have an adverse impact on our organization. I urge you to oppose House Bill 1224. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenboom. Further opponent testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Christina Schaefer. I serve as Senior Vice President, Associate General Counsel, and Director of Government Relations for Dakota Bank. Dakota Bank is also a state-chartered Federal Reserve supervised bank headquartered in Aberdeen, South Dakota. We have locations in 17 communities across South Dakota. We're in the large communities like Rapid City and Sioux Falls, but we also have branches in smaller communities like Lemon, Clark, Webster, and Bison. Thank you for the opportunity today to speak in opposition to HB 1224. As other proponents have mentioned, banking is a highly regulated industry, particularly when it comes to the industry's ability to approve or deny accounts. So to be clear, discrimination is already illegal under federal and state law and is actively examined by regulators. As you might guess from my somewhat long title, a good portion of my 20 plus years in banking surrounds compliance and risk. There are a myriad of laws that currently exist regarding account closure. And when a regulatory agency comes in, one of the first things that they will ask each bank is, please provide me a list of accounts that you've closed or loans that you've denied and the reasons why. That's one of the very first things the regulators ask. The other thing that they'll ask is they'll ask for complaint data. And financial institutions keep track of complaints, both with respect to complaints they might have received, as well as complaints that might have been made to either our state or federal regulators. The purpose of those actions as part of the examination process is to make sure the banks are making decisions that are appropriate and not violating any state or federal law. We have heard reference to the executive order issued in August of 2025 that ensured that federal regulators don't have operations like Operation Choke Point, that there are no policies or practices that allow financial institutions to deny or restrict services based on political beliefs, religious beliefs, or lawful business activities. As part of this order, banking regulators were actually directed to review supervisory and complaint data for instances of unlawful banking and refer such cases to the Attorney General. Now, this is consistent with what we are seeing from our other federal regulators. They've removed reputation risk as something that banks are examined on. They're indicating that banks should avoid broad termination of categories of customers. In some, there are already federal requirements in place, making this legislation repetitive and unnecessary. I also think it's important that we emphasize that banks are not looking for reasons to not bank a customer. Banks know that a broad, diverse customer base is important to its viability. This is particularly true as competition for banking services has become fierce. When I left Miller, South Dakota and went to college at Brookings, I had to go open a new checking account in Brookings because it just didn't make sense. I wasn't able to drive home and do my deposits and whatnot. Today, with online banking, internet banking, there's so much competition for deposits. And in many of our communities, banks are the economic engine. We survive because of the communities that we serve. Dakota Bank is able to offer the products and services that it does because of our 70,000 customers. We're not looking for reasons to exit a relationship. We're looking for a strong customer base. Now, there are reasons, as people have mentioned, that we might have to deny a loan or there might be a deposit account that's closed, but those are for lawful reasons, and all of these are designed to protect consumers. These center around risk or an existing law. For example, if you're a corporation and you want to open a bank account, we are required by law to ask for information regarding the ownership of that company. A bank might choose to not lend to a particular industry because they're trying to diversify. It won't make sense, for example, for a bank to have 100% of its loans in hotels. We recently saw an example of another instance where banks were instructed actually by FinCEN, a federal regulatory agency, to take a look at Minnesota customers based in Hennepin or Ramsey County who might have received federal benefit payments. Banks were encouraged to examine those accounts and if there was fraud, to take action accordingly. Because banks are just that. Banks are risk managers. They're managing risk to provide stability to our banking system. We do this not to just protect our business, but to protect our customers. Because when your customers give you money, when we accept a deposit, when we make a loan, we take our obligation to protect those people very, very seriously. South Dakota has earned its reputation as a business-friendly state by providing and promoting clear and consistent regulation. HB 1224 creates vague standards and fights litigation over routine lawful banking decisions. There's existing framework that exists to ensure customers are protected, and I would respectfully request that you oppose HB 1224, and we'll stand by for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenboom. We are at about our 15 minutes, but we do have 4 more, so if you want to come up and add additional information, let's try not to repeat anything.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for a little latitude on the time this morning. My name's Carl Adam. I serve as the President and CEO of the South Dakota Bankers Association, representing over 70 member banks, and I'm also a registered lobbyist here in South Dakota. I'm trying not to, I don't want to plow ground that's already been plowed, but I do think it's important to put a couple of points of emphasis in a couple of areas. Let me begin with a fundamental point. Discrimination by financial institutions is already illegal under extensive, enforced, and routinely examined federal and state law. Banks operate under one of the most comprehensive anti-discrimination frameworks in the economy. It was mentioned earlier, ECOA, Fair Housing Act, Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the Community Reinvestment Act, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, the Right to Financial Privacy Act. All of these are anti-discrimination laws and policies that banks follow. These laws provide real remedies for consumers, including restitution, civil penalties, enforcement actions, and private rights of action. These are not passive statutes. They require documentation, adverse action notices, record retention, data reporting, and are reviewed during every state and federal examination. Banks are examined regularly by the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, and the South Dakota Division of Banking. If discrimination occurs, there are remedies, there are penalties, and there is enforcement. The federal action has already been readdressed. It was commented on by the proponents as well as some of my opponent colleagues. On August 7 of 2025, President Trump issued an executive order entitled Guaranteeing Fair Banking for All Americans. In response to this executive order, the U.S. Small Business Administration sent formal notices to banks across the country requiring each of them a review of internal policies, a review of prior account decisions, reinstatement of accounts when appropriate, and submission of a compliance report back to the SBA by December 5 of 2025. A bank's failure to comply with this executive order would trigger federal oversight actions. Federal and state regulators are already actively engaged on this issue. House Bill 1224 would layer an additional state cause of action on top of a strong and ongoing federal compliance regime. This is duplication. It's not additional protection. Under current law, a plaintiff must prove unlawful discrimination using defined standards. House Bill 1224 would shift that burden to banks to justify lawful credit and deposit decisions after the fact in civil litigation. That means routine account closures, fraud prevention measures, sanctions compliance, and risk-based credit decisions could all become litigation events. To better illustrate the danger of House Bill 1224's burden-shifting, litigation-driven framework, it is helpful to look at how this approach would function if applied to another highly regulated industry. Let's talk about insurance just for a moment. Imagine insurance companies being required to defend every underwriting decision in court if an applicant alleges that a lawful activity factored into the premium or denial of the denial decision. What would happen? The insurance company actuarial risk models would become litigation targets. Companies raise premiums to offset legal exposure. Higher risk applicants become harder to insure, and smaller insurance companies exit markets. Banks do underwrite credit using objective risk standards. If every risk-based decision becomes litigation eligible, institutions respond by tightening access and raising costs. We also have a reputation at stake. Over the past 45 years, South Dakota has built a national reputation of being a pro-business, pro-banking state. That reputation matters. I have provided a one-pager front and back to each of the committee members that highlights the banking industry's annual financial contributions to the state of South Dakota, and I'll just touch on a couple of these points.
Can we wrap it up?
I'll wrap it up,
Thank
Madam Chair, you bet. Thank you. On the handout, we talk about the contributions the banking industry makes to bank franchise tax, over $60 million in fiscal year 2025, and also unclaimed property receipts exceeding $238 million this year. The bottom line is discrimination is already illegal. Federal regulators have already addressed this concern with the executive order. Banks are routinely examined and held accountable. House Bill 1224 shifts enforcement from state and federal law and regulation to litigation. This bill is not necessary to protect consumers. It's duplicative and invites costly litigation that will ultimately reduce access to services and harm the very communities we serve. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I urge you to resist House Bill 1224. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. If anybody else would just like to throw in a me too on the record, that would be great.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Justin Smith, attorney from Sioux Falls, registered lobbyist for the Greater Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce. With your indulgence, I would just ask one question. If this bill was necessary for South Dakota, if these discriminatory practices were happening with financial institutions in this state, I would wager that this room would be full to the brim of people who are crying out for this bill. It is not. We have two political activist groups from somewhere else in the country that are asking you to pass this law, and the one example that was given by one of those national activist groups is not here in the room today. This problem isn't happening in our state. We handle things with the free market. Please vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Dean Krogman, I represent the South Dakota Independent Bankers Association, and we're made up of state charters, approximately 60 of them, with 400 locations in the state, 20,000 employees, and this really is duplicative. Now, you all have already passed a bill that the governor signed that took away the duplication of regulation of bad debt, where the state says we'll accept your filing at the federal level. This, just imagine, and I'll stop, if the state and federal rule differently on a claim, how do you settle it? You cannot duplicate regulation in an industry like ours, and we urge you to vote no on this.
Thank you, Mr. Krogman. I'm going to need you to sign in with the pages also. Okay, one more final me too.
I won't even sit down, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tara Larson, registered lobbyist for the South Dakota Trust Association. Me too.
Thank you, Ms. Larson.
Mike Bockerny, CEO of the Economic Development Professional Association, also registered lobbyist for the Aberdeen Chamber, Aberdeen Development Corporation. Us too. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bockerny. Okay, moving on to rebuttal. We have a rebuttal from the prime sponsor.
Madam Chair, I'm going to defer the rebuttal to Mr. Sharp. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Sharp, again, Senior Counsel with ADF Action. Just a few brief responses. This language closely mirrors President Trump's executive order, in fact, specifically referencing protecting individuals because of their First Amendment activities or engagement in lawful activities. That was intentional because we know that banks, as we've heard, are already complying with the things that the Trump administration is doing in this, making sure that consumers have access to financial services without facing discrimination. But we also know that the White House can change, and what can be done with one executive order can quickly be undone with a subsequent one. This is why it's so critical and why we're seeing other states take up this issue, because they recognize that these protections against discrimination need to be permanent and lasting in state law. Second, on the duplicative aspect, there are many both federal and state laws that deal with anti-discrimination. These have never been held to be duplicative. In fact, they're two different sort of regulatory regimes. And the Federal Office of the Comptroller of Currency has talked about how it is perfectly consistent with federal banking regulations for states to have state consumer protections against discrimination. That's exactly what this bill is doing, is codifying state consumer protections against debanking and discrimination. A couple of other things. We've heard about flexibility for banks. That is baked into this bill. We do recognize that there are a lot of factors that go into decisions as banks and other financial institutions are making decisions. Not only do we narrow what we're talking about, again, the only things that banks cannot do, the only thing that these large $100 billion in transactions institutions cannot do is to shut down an account or take other adverse action because of their speech, because of their religious exercise, or participation in lawful activity. Anything outside of that, whether it is maximizing profitability, which we explicitly put in the bill, whether it is considering whether they want to engage in that type of industry or offer those types of services, all of those are exempt. So this is narrowly focused, just like in previous times we focused on racial discrimination or other things. This is narrowly focused on protecting those First Amendment activities and ensuring that gun manufacturers, oil and gas, those industries, because of who they are, because of their engagement in lawful activities, are not discriminated against. Final thing is, I want to go back to the importance of transparency in all of this. Really at the core of this bill is transparency, of just letting any consumer know that if they unexpectedly find that their card is declined, their account is shut down, that they can understand why. And as long as there is a legitimate reason, again, one of the plethora of reasons it's available, that's the end of the story. And in fact, this bill includes protections for banks against frivolous lawsuits. So in the concern about litigation and all of that, I think it's unfounded, because not only in the states that have done this, as I mentioned, Tennessee, Idaho have done this, Florida, Texas, and other states have done similar actions. There has not been a slew of litigation because we believe banks are going to comply. They're not going to discriminate. And we put in protections here to make sure that no person tries to weaponize and misuse this. Because if someone does, the banks can actually go back against that individual for frivolous lawsuits and hold them accountable for trying to abuse process. So we've taken into account a lot of those concerns raised with this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. We will move on to committee questions. Representative Weisgram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for Mr. Afdahl.
State your question.
Thank you. So we've already heard from Mr. Rosenboom that this will affect his organization. And if I caught your testimony correctly, you believe that other organizations will be affected by this legislation, even though the $100 billion transactions was a qualifier. Did I understand you correctly?
Mr. Aftal?
Madam Chair, good question, Representative Weisgram. Yes, I think if you look at the definition in the bill, it says any state chartered bank, essentially it says any bank as defined in 51A1-2, or lists all the other entities with transactions over $100 billion. So that qualifier of the $100 billion, in my reading of the bill, does not apply to state chartered banks. Therefore, all state chartered banks are covered by the bill.
Follow up?
Yes. So just in general, or in closing, the unintended consequences of this bill for state chartered banks are?
Well, Madam
Mr.
Chair, all of our banks would have to gear up to comply with this and be prepared to defend, every credit decision they make.
Follow up? Thank you. Further questions of the committee? Representative Greenfield?
Thank you. This is for Mr. Sharp, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Sharp, have you been in touch with people from South Dakota that wanted you to come here because they are seeing this very problem occurring within the banks?
Mr. Sharp?
Thank you. Madam Chair, Representative, yes, one of our close groups we work with, South Dakota Family Voice, experienced this. I know in some of our research we've seen other organizations that brought up Silencer Central that experienced debanking as well on this issue. So we've have heard examples of this happening here in South Dakota.
Follow up. Mr. Sharp, why isn't South Dakota Family Voice here
Mr. Sharp?
to testify?
Madam Chair, Representative, I can't speak for them. I know their contract lobbyist was here on behalf of AFP. I don't know. I'd have to defer to them on that. But I know that my understanding is they're supportive of this legislation.
Thank you.
Representative Duffy?
Thank you, Chair. For Mr. Amdahl. A follow-up to Representative Greenfield. When somebody complains about banking, does this come to your department at the state, or how is this tracked? And essentially, are we an outlier? Do we have a problem? Is where I'm going with this. So I'll start there.
Madam Chair, good question. So consumers have the ability to file a complaint with several different organizations. They can file them with our office. We have a form on our website. They can file a complaint with the federal agency, the Attorney General's office, Federal Trade Commission, several different places. So we routinely get complaints against entities that we don't regulate. So in that scenario, we forward that. We try to get them in touch with the right person. So if they're, get them to the appropriate federal regulator. Are we missing the boat here? Just haven't taken a call or received a complaint on this topic that I was debanked because I'm whatever. I mean, just have not received one of those complaints. So, are there one-offs out there? I don't know, could be, but is there some groundswell of this going on in our state? Just not seeing it, Representative Duffy.
Follow up? No. Representative Peterson?
Thank you. For Mr. Adam.
State your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Adam, thank you for this handout. It caught my attention. As we know, there's a lot of unclaimed property coming through to the state from large national banks. Is there a concern that some of these banks could maybe charter in another state if they felt the laws here were not fair to their business?
Mr. Adam?
Madam Chair, Carl Adams, South Dakota Bankers Association. Thank you, Representative, for the question. It is a byproduct of this kind of punitive legislation. So I serve on behalf of South Dakota State or South Dakota banks here in our humble state. I have 51 colleagues. The other states, Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. South Dakota is well known among my colleagues in the banking industry being a really attractive, good environment for us to do business in our state and across the country. They also pay close attention, these large banks pay close attention to the regulatory environment. And if there is legislation that is being considered that would be impactful, negatively impactful to their organization, it doesn't take a big effort on their part to move their charter and subsequently be in another state very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Follow-up?
Yeah, just so to directly clarify, so if some of those banks would no longer be chartered here, that unclaimed property would no longer come to the state.
Mr. Adam?
Madam Chair, that would more than likely be accurate. It's a partnership that's been developed in this state for over 45 years. That is the history of where our banking pro-business climate started in 1980 with Citibank coming to our state. They employ thousands of people here. Our industry employs over 15,000. And this would be a step in the wrong direction for our state.
Thank you. Further questions of the committee? Representative Kaiser, state your question.
Yeah, just for one of the bankers, I guess, or represent the banks. I'm not sure who would want to answer. The question
You could
is,
just state it.
the question is, what exactly would affect your underwriting decision as far as who's acceptable for a good credit or bad credit or a good fit your bank based on this legislation if it would go through? What rules would change based on your accepting a person or not based on this year law?
Mr. Rosenboom, welcome back.
Madam Chair, Dave Rosenboom, President of First Premier Bank. Would you restate the question just?
Well, it seems to be a lot of angst on how you do business, different you're doing it today. If I'm applying for a loan, you have criteria what qualifies me based on risk, based on what I'm applying for. So how would that change your routine of just accepting applicants for loans if this was to go into place?
Yeah, I don't think it changes, Madam Chair. I don't think it changes the process on the front end of the loan. I think if you ever have to sever a relationship for any reason, whether it's deposit relationship, a ACH transaction relationship, a lending relationship, the person who is affected by that account closure then has all kinds of causes of action against us that they currently don't have because the regulatory framework gets so stretched with this. So we have to ensure that in all circumstances that we are prepared going into that relationship. That means more staff. It's certainly from a compliance standpoint, and it also makes sure on the backside, if we ever get charged with anything by one of these customers, that we'd have to defend ourselves.
Thank you. Follow-up? No. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Representative Shorma.
Good morning. You mentioned during your testimony earlier that you are your oversight for your bank is with the Federal Reserve.
Madam Chair, correct. They are one of our two primary regulators, including the South Dakota Division of Banking.
Can you state your name one more time?
Dave Rosenboom.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of serving on the Federal Reserve Bank a while back and on the Internal Audit Committee also, which has oversight of the auditors that come in to the banks. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I know about what they look at, but can you explain the rigor that they apply when they come and visit the bank and internally audit you?
Mr. Rosenboom?
Madam Chair, Dave Rosenboom. Thank you for the question. I don't think we have enough time to go through the detail of the rigor. I would just say it's absolutely extensive. It's beyond anything anyone in this room can imagine, I can assure you that. And I think that my colleague, Christina Schaefer, spoke well as to the fact that from a complaint management standpoint, each and every complaint that comes into the bank, we log and we respond and we decision. And if we did not do that in an adequate and appropriate manner, that complainant could very well go to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, to the Division of Banking, or to anywhere else that venues that open up to them. So this is incredibly extensive in terms of complaint management, and that is certainly one of the things that gets very closely looked at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Peterson.
For Mr. Smith, please, the chamber.
State your question.
Kind of a hypothetical. I think you alluded to some of these thoughts earlier, and you're not a banker and you're not a proponent of the bill. You're kind of a third party, so to speak, because you're pro-business. So I'm a farmer, and I have a cow. I actually do have loans for cows. If I went to a bank that is owned by vegetarians that do not like animal agriculture, could they legally deny me a loan because of those personal beliefs?
Madam Chair, Representative Peterson, good question.
Can you state your name?
Yes, I'm sorry. Justin Smith, Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. Representative Peterson, good question. The answer is no. That would be illegal under all the discriminatory law, protective laws that already exist, that the bankers outlined in their testimony. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this comes down to, okay, what under this bill, what new causes of action would you have? And the devil's in the details. If you sue, the burden of proof shifts to the bank. You could recover triple damages against the bank, et cetera, under this new law, even if the protections already exist elsewhere.
Thank you. One last question. Anyone? Seeing none, we will move on to committee discussion.
Madam Chair.
Representative Shorma.
Just a comment that I heard and understand, based on my depth of knowledge, that this is duplicative. It doesn't add additional new oversights that wouldn't be duplicative, just as stated by Mr. Smith a minute ago. If one suit is brought on a particular matter, even though there's protections elsewhere, it could be end up being litigated on both, and adds to cost for both the bank and the individual. So, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Duffy.
Thank you, Chair. I read this bill twice last night. I couldn't. I wasn't sure I fully understood the whole thing, but we it's a bill. It looks like a bill looking for a different environment than we have. We are a banking state. If Bill Janklow, which I knew some of us knew, was here, he really was the father of modern banking in this state. He would lose his mind here. Most of this is already covered. We are a banking state. Why would we jeopardize that? It's not that hard to leave. Nobody here who's been harmed by this thing is here. That's the next thing. Why do people debank sometimes? I mean, we all remember Silicon Valley Bank just 2-3 years ago. They had to divest, and they didn't, and they took the whole Silicon Valley banking system down. They banked most of the high tech. To me, if we're trying to send the message that the last year and a half that we're out of business, I think we're getting the job done.
Representative Greenfield.
Thank you. Just a couple comments. I think we all come from, a lot of us come from rural areas, and our bankers have been in business for years and years and years. We've done banking with them. Why? Because we trust them. If we don't want to bank with them, I guess, like for me, for example, I could take a baby booty and put my money in between the bed frame and the mattress and be done with it. But I don't think that this is occurring in our state. It may be occurring in an out-of-state situation. But I think in all practical terms, everything that we have in place is adequate. Thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion. Representative Weisgram.
Weisgram moves this bill to the 41st day.
Second.
I have a motion to move to the 41st day by Representative Weisgram, seconded by who? Duffy. Comments on your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it looks to me like this bill would already encompass some burdensome regulation to one of our largest banks. And as others think, it probably affects other banks as well. It just seems to me to be duplicative and burdensome. I appreciate the banking industry, and I encourage you to vote no, or to put this to the 41st day.
Representative Duffy?
Thank you, Chair. I think we have a great ecosystem for banking for a very small state, and that's because the people before us got here. It creates jobs, it creates opportunities. I borrowed, as a small business guy, I put my house up twice on different loans. You know, I have no issue with that. They've treated me fair, and I think you drive around and you see all the people, working here, living here, owning homes, owning cars. I mean, if there was a problem, I think we would know, and I haven't heard it.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This is further comments. Representative
Thank
Peterson.
you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I'm going to support the motion for the first day. Couple points. I have a lot of emails from South Dakotans asking me to oppose this bill. I think I had one or two emails to support from the national groups that were here as proponents. So I do think we need to listen to the people in our state on this issue. A couple other things. I mean, if discrimination was legal, we probably would need a new law to ban it, but I don't believe you can do this right now. My example of discriminating against farmers or anybody else, I don't think you should be able to do that, and I don't believe you can. There was a business that was mentioned earlier in a testimony. I work closely with that business on a bill related to their products. That business is not here asking us to support this bill today. There's a three-letter organization that was also working closely in that bill in the firearms industry. They are also not here asking us to support this. So that, I think, speaks loudly to me. And I just think the risk of passing a law that we don't need, that could do harm, we could lose a lot of funds in our state, and we could lose a lot of jobs in our state if we don't do this right. So that's why I think we got to defeat the bill and pass the motion.
Madam Chair.
Representative Lems.
So I will just state again that this bill was brought because of some of the things that we saw happen under a previous administration. And there actually was going to be an elected official that was going to testify today. He wasn't able to be here. That was at January 6th and did experience some very scary things that happened with that. And so, again, I don't think either that this is happening in our banks, our smaller local banks in South Dakota. However, it has happened with the big banks. And, all we need is we have that executive order from the president. I appreciate that because he has experienced this himself. And so I do think that, is it happening right now? Not so much. Could it be happening with a change in administration? Absolutely. So that's really why this bill was brought. It wasn't trying to target probably anybody in this room. It was brought because of those extreme cases and trying to bring transparency to that. But with that, I respect the committee, I respect the work of the committee, and I think you guys do a great job. And so with that, back to the chair.
Thank you, Representative Lems. Further comments of the? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Representatives Elward,
Pass.
Duffy,
Aye.
Greenfield,
Aye.
Kaiser,
Aye.
Mullally,
No.
Knowles,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
Schwanz,
No.
Shorma,
Aye.
Uribalk,
Aye.
Weisgram,
Aye.
Elward,
No.
Baumüller,
Aye.
Lems.
No.
Madam Chair, we have 9 yea, 4 nay.
House Bill 1224, having received the majority of the members elect, will move to the 41st day. Motion carries. Okay, at this time, I would like to take a personal privilege. Today, I have with me 4-H Ambassador Shadow Madeline Lund from Parker, South Dakota. She is active in showing sheep and in shooting sports, much like myself, so you have a bright future ahead of you. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you're learning a lot. Anything else from the committee? Representative Schwanz.
This will be fast. It's a personal privilege. I heard through the grapevine that there was a little birdie in here that had a birthday yesterday. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
I think we're done with our House bills.
Yes, nice work, committee. I'm extremely proud of this committee as your vice chair. We have had a lot of work, and we've done it all, so very good job. We have no more House bills before crossover day, and looks like we have 5 Senate bills coming up. But are we meeting on Monday?
Yes.
Okay, we will be meeting on Monday, and the chair will entertain a motion.
Second.
Representative Shorma has made a motion to adjourn, second by Representative Knowles. This is a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Every day, SDPB connects South Dakotans with stories that inform, inspire, and bring us together. SDPB, good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB is your home for fact-based journalism, connecting South Dakotans with news they can trust and stories that matter. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB. From children's programs to in-depth documentaries, SDPB sparks curiosity and lifelong learning in every South Dakotan. SDPB. Good, useful, and full of wonder.